This is Chapter 2 of Roosevelt's Communist Manifesto by Emmanuel M. Jofferson. The Rise of the Illuminist Socialistic Communistic Conspiracy in America. On July 16, 1782, at the Congress of Wilhelmsbad, an alliance was entered into by the Masonic Order and the Order of the Illuminati, which has had tremendous repercussions in world history. The 2,000 lodges of the Order of Illuminati that had come into existence almost overnight joined the lodges of the Masonic Order in a worldwide organization that claimed over 3 million members. The Order of Illuminati started when the American Revolution was already underway, and therefore played no significant part in it. However, before the colonies were united, the Constitution adopted, and our republic established, 15 lodges of the Order of Illuminati were established in the 13 colonies. In 1785, the Columbian Lodge of the Order of the Illuminati was established in New York City. With it were identified Governor DeWitt Clinton, and later Clinton Roosevelt, Charles A. Dana, and Horace Greeley. In 1786, there was established a lodge in Virginia, with which was identified Thomas Jefferson. When the Order of Illuminati was exposed as a revolutionary conspiracy in Bavaria and Weishaupt was attacked, Jefferson, an ardent Illuminist, defended Weishaupt as an enthusiastic philanthropist. The Order of Illuminati rapidly gained such influence in the colonies that its members were able to force the adoption of the Order's insignia as the Great Seal of the United States of America. It can be found on the left side of the reverse of $1 silver certificates of the Treasury. Its eye, mounted on a pyramid, signifies the all-spying eye that was symbolic of Illuminism's terrorist espionage system, the counterpart of the Gestapo, the OGPU, and the NKVD, and of the other cruel and brutal spying nets that Weishaupt disciples have since adopted. Placing the symbol on the Great Seal of the United States of America was a warning that the entire power of the Republic stood behind the very conspiracy that aimed to destroy it, and threatened violence supported by terroristic espionage to those who opposed the conspirators. Novus Ordo Seclorum announces the New Deal of Weishaupt's Illuminists, the date of the insignia, and the seal base of the pyramid, MDCCLXXV1, or 1776, is not meant as the date of the Declaration of Independence, which occurred in the same year, but is the date of the founding of Weishaupt's conspiracy, the Order of Illuminati. Never have revolutionary conspirators been more audacious or less suspected. In Bavaria, as has been stated, the Order of the Illuminati was exposed as a nefarious conspiracy, and it was forced underground in 1785. In the United States, it continued to thrive and prosper in spite of numerous attacks from public platforms and pulpits as a subversive counter-revolutionary conspiracy that aimed to destroy our government and constitution. Among the attackers in 1789 were Representative Rev. Jedediah Morse, President Timothy Dwight of Yale University, and to the chagrin of many modern Harvardists, David Tappan, a Harvard officer. In 1900, following some riots centering about activities of the Order in New York City and elsewhere, many Illuminist lodges went underground or completely merged with Masonic lodges. The Columbian Lodge of the Order of Illuminati emerged into the open once again as the Columbian Laws of the Masonic Order about 1838. High in its ranks was Assemblyman Clinton Roosevelt, a descendant of Claes Martinez van Roosevelt and his wife Janet J. Samuels Clinton R. is cousin of more than a dozen U.S. presidents, including Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, John and John Quincy Adams, James Madison, and Martin Van Buren, all members of the Roosevelt-Delano dynasty. See The Strange Death of Franklin D. Roosevelt, Chedney Press, 1948, that calls itself America's Royal Family. The dynasty owes to the Illuminatist, socialistic, communistic, liberal conspiracy its rise to power. Its continuance in power rests on its leadership in that conspiracy. Equally important is the control of the nominating machinery of both major political parties, and generally of all parties held by the Roosevelt-Delano dynasty since the founding of our republic. This has permitted them to mock and deride the nation's pretense to self-rule. Cousin John Adams was a founder of the Federalistic Party, antecedent of the Republican Party, and from its beginning he gained control of its nominating machinery for his kinsmen of the dynasty. Cousin Martin Van Buren, as running mate of Andrew Jackson, was one of the founders of the Democratic Party. He gained control of the nominating machinery of the Democratic Party for his dynastic kinsmen, and they have retained it ever since. Since then, the dynasty has gained control of the nominating machinery of every new party that came into being, whether liberal, Labor, Communist, Socialist, Bull Moose, Whig, or Republican. Traditionally, they have shown no loyalty except to their selfish interests. No religion or party has ever held their adherents. Almost every third-party movement in our history has been launched by a disgruntled member of the dynasty seeking to assert his claim to public office. On October 29, 1835, Clinton Roosevelt and his powerful associates, the Illuminatist fellow conspirators who were members of the Tammany Hall, undertook to take over control of the Tammany and impress its organization into the furtherance of their plots. The way had been prepared for this move by the agitation stirred up by the British female illuminist Frances Fanny Wright, who came to this country in 1829 to give a series of lectures at Masonic Hall. She advocated the entire Illuminist program of her auxiliary of the Order of Illuminati, see page 73, including communism made more palatable by the label of equal opportunity and equal rights. Atheism, emancipation, women, and free love. She had won a large following among the rabble, who, organized as the Working Men's Party, had polled 6,000 of the 20,000 votes in the election 1829, had elected a member of legislature, and had defeated the Tammany candidates. Clinton Roosevelt and his fellow Illuminati undertook to capitalize on the groundwork done for them by the licentious feminist emissary of the order from abroad. The boss of Tammany was prepared for the move. He had arranged to have the gas lights in the hall turned off, so as to leave the conspirators in darkness and close the meeting before they could carry out their scheme. But the conspirators came prepared for the maneuver. They came armed with the matches then in use, the locofoco matches, and relit the gas lights so that the meeting could proceed. They thus earned themselves the name Locofoco Party. The Locofocos posed as champions of the new social order, the New Deal, and of equal rights. They parted of their intent to kick the moneylenders out of the temple, and were opposed to monopolies. Masked by these noble and worthy causes that appealed to the monochronic mentality of the peasants, The Illuminati of Locofoco undertook to attain the dictatorship objectives laid down by Adam Weishaupt. It is noteworthy that in their initial program, Roosevelt and his crew pretended that they were seeking to uphold the Constitution. In his Science of Government, published shortly thereafter, Roosevelt frankly urged the guttering and abandonment of the Constitution, which he compared with a sinking ship. See page 88. Roosevelt's Locofocos did not succeed in their initial effort to impress Tammany Hall into their conspiracy. In the following year, Roosevelt and his fellow Illuminati organized a third party, an old and confirmed habit of Roosevelt conspirators when they failed to get their wish at the meeting held in their Masonic hall. They nominated themselves as the candidates of the new party, the Whigs, following the bipartisan device dictated by Weishaupt, and now a familiar pattern of the conspirators. Roosevelt sought and obtained for himself and his crew the nominations of the Democratic Party at its Utica convention held in September 15, 1836. They thus aligned both the Whig and the Democratic parties as direct agencies of the Illuminist communist conspiracy. Bipartisanship is synonymous with the Illuminist communist conspiracy. The United States, thus, had what was in effect, if not in name, a communist dictatorship party fully 3/4 of a century before Russia dreamed of communism, and more than a decade before Moses Mordecai, Marx Levi, alias Henrik Karl, Marx, and Engels sought to duplicate in Europe the successes of their fellow conspirators in the United States of America. Emboldened by success, Roosevelt published in 1841 The Science of Government, founded on natural law. It embodies, as stated Adam Weishaupt's pattern of organization of a one world, United Nations dictatorship as a blueprint of the New Deal, or new social order, that Roosevelt planned to impose on the United States of America as a part of the international conspiracy. The plan called for the gradual emasculation and eventual abandonment of the Constitution as a sinking ship. The Roosevelt book, in many of its passages, was quite patently a translation of Weishaupt's German and obviously plagiarized with slight modifications for American adaptation. In much the same manner, Moses Mordecai, Marx Levy, alias Karl Marx, 7 years later, with the aid from America, plagiarized the blueprint of the complementary and derivative administrative aspects of Weishaupt's scheme and published it as his Communist Manifesto. The two publications taken together constitute the whole of Weishaupt's scheme for imposing a communist dictatorship on the world. It was no accident that the substance of the entire communist blueprint of Weishaupt's Illuminati was thus published internationally. World subjugation is of necessity an international affair. The internationalism dictated by Weishaupt and stressed by his disciple Roosevelt is essentially a conspiracy, treason. Members of the conspiracy are required to infiltrate their governments and to help their fellow Illuminist conspirators extend their infiltration to the point of taking over control of the governments. They are required to foster dissension between groups within the nations and wars between nations for the purpose of weakening existing governments. For the same purpose, they are required to bankrupt their governments and people by profligate waste and excessive taxation, and to betray their countries into the hands of their enemies. Above all else, they must place the wealth and resources of their countries at the disposal of the master conspirators for furthering the conspiracy in other lands. Roosevelt and his Illuminist henchmen carefully heeded Weishaupt's internationalist teachings. As soon as their efforts were crowned with success at home, they undertook to foster the conspiracy in Europe. Without their support, Illuminism might have died in Europe. Their instigation and support made possible the 1848 revolution in Europe and the subsequent stimulus to the conspiracy. Without the locofoco Illuminist communist activities of Clinton Roosevelt and his clan, Karl Marx would have remained an obscure, demented German agitator. Charles A. Dana and Horace Greeley gave Karl Marx and his plagiarized Communist Manifesto the international audience that was necessary to give them significance. By employing their fellow Illuminist Marx as correspondent and columnist for their New York Tribune. As related by William Hale in his biography, Horace Greeley, Dana excelled himself in spreading the Illuminist communist ideas parroted by Marx and Engels, his ghostwriter, by plagiarizing parts of their articles and publishing the propaganda as his editorials, page 155. Without this early American support of Marx's Illuminism, communism, his rise would have been as impossible as the later rise of Lenin, Trotsky, and Stalin would have been without American support in the First and Second Russian Revolution. And that concludes Chapter 2 of Roosevelt's Communist Manifesto. If you have enjoyed this audiobook and want to see more like it, please consider subscribing. It would be greatly appreciated. And on to next week for Roosevelt's Illuminist Communistic New Deal program.